Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, KAGE, the creator and author behind all the what-if stories you see on this channel, powered by your amazing suggestions. Every story you hear is written, edited, and produced by me, so if you're ever wondering who's behind the magic, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to stay updated, like the video, and don't forget to drop your what-if ideas in the comments. Today's story is the movie for what if Naruto was reincarnated as a slime. I'm almost finished with part 1 of Adventure Time X Naruto, and I know I haven't done shoutouts in a bit, but I'm mainly focused on getting these last 2 movies out. This story had potential, that's all I can really say about it now since I never got too far into the story. Same for all my other fics, someday this will be back. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Red. That was all Naruto could see. Crimson liquid filled his lungs, staining his hands and hair as it pooled around him, soaking into the shattered ground. He lay on a desolate battlefield, a wasteland forged by destruction and mayhem. If he had the strength to turn his head, he would see his so-called brother lying lifeless beside him, already claimed by death. Maybe it was foolish to believe Sasuke would change. The raven-haired shinobi had never truly shown signs of redemption. Or maybe Naruto had just been naive, clinging to hope even when the world had proven time and time again that nothing good could come from war. The fourth great shinobi war had finally ended. And so had he. A fresh wave of blood poured from his wounds, his vision flickering as a familiar pull tugged at his mind. But that didn't make sense. Kurama was gone. He had felt it, the last remnants of his partner fading away. He wished he could see him one last time, wish confirmed. Loading, unable to locate designation, Kurama. Replacement, unique skill great beast. What? Naruto's thoughts stilled, a voice unfamiliar, calm, and detached had spoken directly into his mind. Or maybe it was just a hallucination, he was dying, after all. Back to his earlier thoughts, he wondered what it must have been like to be Kurama, a chakra beast. Sure, it would have been a little boring at times. But the ability to shapeshift would have been pretty cool. Request confirmed. Race skill activated, additional functions available, details will be provided later. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, what the hell? That time, he muttered aloud. But no answer came. Either he was delirious, or he was imagining things. He let out a weak, breathless sigh. His blood had already painted the earth beneath him, but at this point, he didn't care. It was over. As long as the world found peace, true peace, he could accept this end. His vision blurred further, the weight of his own body fading away. His eyelids grew heavy, the world around him slipping into darkness. As the last threads of consciousness unraveled, he let out one final wish. I just hope I'm still as awesome in the afterlife, maybe I could learn some new jutsu. Final request confirmed. Unique skill forge, created and set in place. That voice was the last thing he heard before the void swallowed him whole. It was strange. Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Then why could he still feel? Well, perhaps feeling wasn't the right word. He wasn't in pain, nor was he lying on solid ground. Instead, he existed in a weightless void, floating, drifting, unanchored. His feet didn't touch anything. His hands moved, but without form or resistance. His eyes refused to open, yet somehow, he was aware. What was this? He tried to place the sensation, but his mind faltered. He wasn't bleeding out anymore, which meant he wasn't dying. But at the same time, this didn't feel like life, either. It was as if he was everywhere and nowhere all at once. It was confusing. He attempted to move, but it was unlike anything he had experienced before. His body, if he even had one, didn't respond the way it should. There was no rolling of his feet, no shifting of his muscles. Was he even human anymore? Did he still have arms, legs? Maybe this was some kind of waiting room for the afterlife. He couldn't be in hell. There was no fire, no unbearable heat. But it didn't feel like heaven either. Then, without warning, something shifted. Suddenly, he could see. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper, something instinctual. He became aware of everything around him: jagged rocks, towering boulders, the enclosed space around him. Was he in the same place? No, the valley of the end didn't have a ceiling. Then where was he? More importantly, what happened to his body? Panic flickered in his mind. He had so many questions, and he needed answers. He needed to talk to someone, anyone. He tried to shout, to demand an explanation, but no sound came. His voice, the same one he used to yell, to joke, to annoy the village, to declare his dreams to the world, was gone. That was only the beginning. Eventually, Naruto figured out what he had become, or at least, he made up a term for it. A blob of pure chakra, compressed into a small, orb-like form. It wasn't flesh. It wasn't any natural material. He could tell because chakra behaved like everything and nothing all at once, flowing, shifting, and solidifying in ways no earthly substance ever could. Then again, was he even on Earth anymore? For what felt like an eternity, the once blonde shinobi drifted aimlessly through his confined space. It was big, massive, even, but still enclosed. A cave, maybe? He could sense towering rock formations, patches of strange plant life, and glowing flowers unlike anything he had ever encountered. Not that he could see them. But that wasn't the only reason he believed he had left his world behind. His body, if it could even be called that, was the real proof. He felt his form, felt the energy thrumming within him, but he wasn't human anymore. He wasn't a tailed beast, either. He was something entirely new, something the shinobi world had never seen before. It was confusing. Maybe he had reincarnated. Not that it mattered much right now. The worst part of this new existence, there was absolutely nothing to do. Naruto sighed, at least, the chakra-based equivalent of one, and settled himself onto a weird-looking rock. Well, at least he thought it was a rock. It glowed, that alone made him curious. Unique skill unlocked. Great Beast is now active. Naruto froze. That voice, even after all this time, he recognized it. It was the same one that had spoken to him as he died. Why was it back? What did it want? Oi, I know you can hear me, you creepy, weird thing. Why the hell are you watching me? His voice echoed, not through the cave, but inside his own mind. Usually, Naruto would have attacked first and asked questions later. But right now, that wasn't an option. He had already learned, the hard way, that his chakra wasn't the same anymore. He couldn't mold it like before, couldn't shape it into the jutsu he had spent his whole life mastering. The only thing he could do was shift his form, which, while cool, wasn't exactly helpful in this situation. And now there was a voice in his head. Again. I am Great Beast, one of your unique skills. You unlocked me by remaining in this magical-rich environment. I have multiple functions. My main two are producing tailed beast chakra, and analyzing this new world you found yourself in. Naruto blinked, or at least, he tried to. The concept of blinking didn't seem to apply when he didn't have eyelids. Magicules, what the hell were those? Wait, that wasn't even the important part. You're telling me I unlocked you, like some kind of power-up? Correct. Huh. Naruto wasn't sure how to feel about that. On one hand, awesome, free power-up. On the other hand, he was dead, possibly reincarnated, and now some mysterious voice was telling him he had unlocked it like he was in a game. This was a lot to take in. Alright, beastie. My designation is Great Beast. Yeah, whatever, Naruto huffed. You mind explaining what's going on, 'cause I'm kinda lost here. Acknowledged. Compiling necessary information, processing, complete. You are currently residing in an underground cave within an unknown world. Your body has undergone a complete transformation into a unique lifeform classified as a chakra slime. Naruto felt his entire being freeze. A slime. Correct. Like, the weakest monster in every fantasy book ever? Not necessarily. Naruto sighed, again, in the chakra equivalent of a sigh. This was going to be a long afterlife. Alright, beast, first question, how do I get out of here? Unknown. However, I can assist in analyzing your surroundings and optimizing your abilities for survival. Right, guess that's a start. Pushing aside the overwhelming strangeness of the situation, Naruto focused on the immediate problem. He had no form of protection. As a weak, squishy slime, he was completely defenseless. First, he needed to find a way to get stronger. Then, he'd bust out of this place, because there was no way he was spending his new life as a cave dweller. Acknowledged. Your other unique skill is ready to be used. However, I can provide a basic scan of your surroundings before you activate it. Would you like more information? Hell yeah, Naruto said without hesitation. He wasn't stupid, far from it, maybe just a bit impulsive. If this voice was offering him free information, he'd take it. His so-called unique skill could wait until he had a better grasp of what was going on. Starting passive scan. You will now be able to move freely, and I will provide explanations for notable objects. If you wish to halt this function, simply think X in your mind. Naruto didn't respond, he just moved. He hopped off the strange glowing rock he had been sitting on, eyeing it expectantly. Analysis complete. This is a high-purity magicule stone, a crystallized form of magicules. Naruto blinked, there was that word again, the hell is a magicule? Magicules are the fundamental energy source of this world. They are similar to chakra but more widespread, existing in all living things and the environment itself. However, unlike chakra, magicules do not require a circulatory system. They are influenced by emotions and intent, making them a versatile power source for spells, abilities, and skills. Naruto frowned, so, chakra without hand signs? Incorrect. Magicules can be used in structured spells, much like hand signs in ninjutsu. However, they are also instinctive, meaning creatures born with them can manipulate magic naturally. Naruto hummed in thought. That was interesting. If magicules were this world's chakra, did that mean he could use them too? Due to your unique existence as a chakra slime, your body is composed of neutral energy, which can adapt to both magicules and chakra. However, direct spellcasting may be difficult unless converted into ninjutsu. Figures, Naruto muttered. Alright, what else we got? He continued moving, taking in more of his surroundings, eager to learn what other strange things this cave had in store for him. There was a lot he didn't understand, but with help from the voice in his head, he quickly learned more about his new environment. After some time, boredom set in again, and Naruto decided to inquire about his second unique skill. It was called Skill Forge, and it had multiple functions, thankfully, since he didn't want to be stuck with just one trick. The first function allowed him to perceive any form of energy just by thinking pure. This let him quickly analyze things and even perceive the emotions and senses of others by reading their energy. It was a bit like a heightened version of his sensory skills, but with far more range and accuracy. The second function wasn't as exciting, but he figured it would prove useful down the line. By using peer within a certain range, he could analyze the magicules around him, learning from their energy and stimulating his own chakra growth by simply experiencing it. Watching and learning was now an active part of his power. The main function was what caught his attention, though. It allowed him to dig deeper into any form of energy, locating skills no matter their origin. However, there was a catch: he couldn't use these skills directly unless they were fused with one of the 5 main aspects of ninjutsu: ninjutsu, elemental jutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, or sealing jutsu. Great, Naruto muttered to himself. So I'm stuck with the basics, no sage arts or summoning jutsu, that's lame. But despite the limitation, Naruto quickly realized the potential. He could still use Skill Forge on himself, slowly rebuilding and refining his old abilities from his past life. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something. His next move was testing the skill on the cave itself. The results were subtle but effective: a small chakra boost that increased his energy, as well as the unexpected acquisition of a new skill, store and craft. Naturally, Naruto didn't waste any time. He converted this skill into a sealing art, evolving it into great craft and store. The result? A unique kind of seal that allowed him to store items and preserve their details. More importantly, it let him know exactly what was inside and what materials could be used to create new items. That was great news, especially since he needed kunai and shuriken. Wait, could he even use them anymore? His new body was starting to bum him out. While his sensory perception had expanded beyond what he could have imagined, he felt strangely limited in other ways. Sensations, like touch, seemed distant, as if they didn't belong to him anymore. Some more time passed, and boredom began to set in again. Naruto knew better than to get too close to the monsters that roamed the cave, which he'd come to understand were best avoided. Great Beast had strongly advised him against confrontation. While he still retained fragments of his old shinobi skills, he couldn't exactly blast something away with his Rasengan. Techniques like that had to be relearned, and a shadow clone wasn't very helpful when you were small and squishy. So, Naruto had gotten creative. He discovered that his body still behaved like a slime, meaning he could absorb most objects into himself. This led to the invention of his own little game. With a mental yell, he sped through a field of glowing flowers. They reminded him of stamina moss, but these flowers pulsed with energy. Before getting too carried away, he scanned them with Skill Forge, eager to see what he could learn. To his surprise, the flowers granted him a healing ability, one of the highest forms of restoration he'd ever encountered. The thought of random flowers possessing such power was strange, but Naruto took it in stride. Next, he absorbed the flowers, forming a picture on the ground that only he could see from above. As he moved from one patch to another, he began to create an image of himself, his old blonde self, using the flowers. He also started experimenting with magic rocks, drawing out more detailed shapes as he went. He was so caught up in the process that he didn't realize how far he had wandered. Without warning, he launched himself off a cliff, his speed taking him over the edge before he could process what was happening. Luckily, being a chakra slime had its perks. He didn't feel the fall. But when he landed, he felt something under him that was oddly familiar. Instead of the usual rocky, broken ground, he found himself cushioned by a gelatinous surface. His gaze quickly flickered downward, and he was surprised to find another slime beneath him. This one was not like him, it was still and unmoving, but somehow unlike the mindless creatures he remembered. Naruto hesitated. He wasn't sure what to do. Slimes were typically mindless, but this one was different. He was sure of that. Should he move, or absorb it? Maybe he would grow bigger. But something about the way it lay there kept him from acting immediately. The chakra slime decided to test the waters. He could tell the other slime was different. Any normal slime would have tried to merge or absorb him, but this one stayed still. With that in mind, Naruto figured he would do something that might provoke a reaction. With a stretch of his form, Naruto began to overtake the slime beneath him, moving as if to consume it. But instead of remaining stationary, the other slime darted away, retreating to the far corner, just out of Naruto's reach. That confirmed it. This was no ordinary slime. A regular slime would have simply let itself be absorbed, expanding into a larger mass of unconsciousness. But this one, it had reacted, possibly even trying to avoid him. Maybe, just maybe, it was like him. Before Naruto could delve deeper into his thoughts, the other slime shot forward, using some kind of water dash. It slammed into Naruto, sending him crashing into the wall. Maybe trying to attack without any communication wasn't the best idea after all. Naruto groaned as he peeled himself off from the wall, the impact running through his body. His chakra slime form wasn't exactly built for collisions. But the pain was minimal. Still, that was one surprise he didn't need right now. The other slime hovered in the corner, still watching him, as if waiting for the next move. It didn't seem hostile, more like it was guarding something, or maybe testing him, like he had tested it. The lack of any instinct to consume him made the whole encounter even stranger. Naruto tilted his body to face the slime, stretching slightly, as if preparing for something more productive. All right, I get it," he muttered to himself, though he wasn't sure if the slime could even understand him. No attacking without reason. He paused, glancing at the slime again. "You don't want to merge, right? Or maybe, you just don't trust me." "Yeah, I get that. I'm not exactly typical slime either." The slime remained motionless, watching him intently, its gelatinous body shifting slightly in what Naruto assumed was curiosity. It didn't give any indication of wanting to attack, but it certainly wasn't opening up either. Naruto scratched his head, frustration beginning to grow. "Well, I'm not looking for a fight. You want to team up or something?" The words left his mouth before he could think about them, and he let out a short, nervous laugh. Teaming up with another slime? What a weird thought. To his surprise, the other slime hesitated, moving just a little closer. It stopped short, still cautious, as if waiting for Naruto to make the next move. The silence dragged on for a few moments before Naruto spoke again. "You're not just some regular slime, huh?" "I mean, I know I'm not either." Great Beast voice interrupted his thoughts, clear in his mind. "Naruto, it seems you and this slime share a similar unique skill. Both of you lack the ability to speak. But communication is still possible through connecting me and this great sage. I can establish a link between your minds, allowing you to communicate more effectively." Naruto blinked. "Wait, really? You can do that?" "Yes, though it may not be perfect, you will be able to exchange thoughts with this creature in a way that does not require speech. If you wish to attempt this, let me know." The chakra slime quickly answered yes. In that moment, Naruto's chakra rippled outward, and he felt a subtle shift, a lightness in his awareness. It was like a small, invisible thread connecting him to the slime, something that let him feel its presence more clearly. Connection to Great Sage is complete, minds have been linked, link accepted. Great Sage? Wait, link accepted? Naruto's mind raced. He knew this slime was no ordinary creature, but to be connected to a skill that sounded similar to Great Beast, what did that mean? Wasn't the point of a unique skill like his to be the only one with it? But then another thought hit him, causing his heart to race. Was this slime a reincarnation too? Like him? Maybe a shinobi from his world who had died around the same time? If this was Sasuke, Naruto swore he'd attack the Uchiha and beat him into a pulp. A flood of thoughts poured into his head, along with a faint, soft voice. It wasn't his own thoughts, this was something else, someone else. Start explaining, who are you? Why do you have that weird energy around you? Why do you have great sage? Are you a reincarnation like me? The voice was quick, almost frantic, and Naruto could barely keep up with the questions. Was this slime a girl? He couldn't tell. The voice was vague and fast, and more questions came at him, flooding his mind. Each one seemed to dig deeper. But the feeling wasn't one of hostility, it was curious, almost desperate for answers. Calm down, you're giving me a headache with all these questions. How do you even have a high-pitched voice when you're speaking in my head? Naruto asked. The slime's voice shifted to annoyance. That's rude, you know. I'm just trying to make sure you're not some weird monster. It paused, as if realizing something. Wait, that proves it, thank God I'm not alone in this stupid cave. Okay, can you at least tell me this, who are you? Naruto sighed, trying to figure out what to say. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, from the village hidden in the leaves. You've heard of it, right? The slime was silent for a moment. Hidden. What? Naruto blinked, surprised. The first person to talk to him in ages, and they didn't know about the hidden leaf? It must be someone from a smaller country. Maybe Lightning, considering how isolated they had been before the war. It's one of the great villages. He tried again, but was cut off quickly. Dude, can you stop speaking like you're in some anime? It's fine if you're an otaku, but don't go getting all dramatic about your new life, the slime replied. Naruto stared, confused. I don't even know what an otaku is. I was a shinobi before all this. The slime turned away from him, clearly unsure how to handle this. Okay, if you say so. Naruto stood silently, his mind racing. He had already known he was in another world, he'd accepted that much when he first woke up as a slime. But now, with everything he'd just learned, it hit him harder than ever. This wasn't just a different world. There were entire other worlds out there, each with its own people, cultures, and histories. He clenched his fists, a wave of realization washing over him. It wasn't just about this strange new life he'd been thrust into, it was about all the possibilities that came with it. He had reincarnated, which meant other people could have. 2. Others from different worlds, just like him, might be living lives entirely disconnected from everything he knew. Naruto's mind wandered. What were these other worlds like? Were they full of people who looked like him, or completely different? Were there more powerful beings, more strange and powerful creatures? If there were other worlds, then how many were out there? How many more lives were being lived at the same time, in different dimensions, different realities? His thoughts flickered to the slime. It didn't know anything about his world, about the hidden leaf, or even about what it meant to be a shinobi. It had no context for his past life, and perhaps it never would. But that didn't matter. What mattered was this: there were other worlds, and he had no idea how many there were, how many different realities might be out there, each with its own rules, its own histories, and its own people. What the hell, he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. This is bigger than I thought. I've got to figure out how to make sense of all this. His thoughts buzzed with questions and possibilities, but one thing became clear to him: there was a whole multiverse out there, waiting to be explored. And he, Naruto Uzumaki, was somehow part of it. But for now, he supposed he would stick to this life, at least until he was strong enough to explore the vast plains of existence. The thought of traveling between worlds, uncovering their secrets, and meeting others like him lingered in the back of his mind. But first, he needed to survive this one. The chakra slime rolled forward, moving next to the only other conscious monster in this cave. "Alright, enough about me," Naruto said, stretching his form slightly. "What about you? I told you where I came from, so it's only fair you do the same." The other slime, Rina, as he would soon come to know, hesitated for a moment, shifting slightly as if gathering her thoughts. "Well, my name was Rina Mikami. Before all this, I was just a regular, underpaid, female, office worker. Nothing too exciting. One day, I got stabbed trying to help my co-worker, and the next thing I knew, I woke up like this." Naruto blinked. "Wait, you died too? So you are a reincarnation?" "Yeah, I kinda figured you were too, but I wasn't sure." With that, Naruto began to explain a bit more about who he was, trying to get the girl to believe in his stories. Rina shifted slightly, her form wobbling as if she were raising an eyebrow, if slimes even had those. "Alright, hold on. You're telling me you were a ninja? Like, running around in black outfits, throwing knives, and doing backflips?" Naruto let out a groan. "It's called being a shinobi, and no, we didn't just sneak around in the shadows all day." Rina didn't sound convinced. And you expect me to believe that?" "Well, yeah," Naruto shot back. "I lived it. I fought in wars, took down crazy strong enemies, and I was this close to being Hokage." "Right," Rina drawled. "Because obviously, you, a teenage ninja, were about to become the leader of an entire village." "Totally believable." Naruto sputtered. "Hey, I worked my ass off for that. I was one of the strongest shinobi alive." Rina hummed, unimpressed. "Okay, so let's say I believe you were some kind of superpowered ninja. You're telling me your world just had people throwing magic energy around like it's normal?" Naruto sighed. "It's not magic, it's chakra. We use it to do all kinds of things, walking on water, making clones, shooting fireballs, summoning giant toads." "Summoning what now?" "Giant battle toads," Naruto repeated firmly. Rina was silent for a moment. "You're messing with me." "I wish I was," Naruto muttered. "But it was just a normal Tuesday for me." Rina still didn't sound convinced, but she let out a sigh. "You know what, fine. I've already been reborn as a slime, so I guess I can't call anything impossible anymore. If you say you were a ninja, whatever." Naruto huffed. "Glad we finally got that settled." "Doesn't mean I believe you completely, though," Rina added. "I'm just choosing to roll with it for now. If you really were a shinobi, I guess I'll see proof eventually." Naruto grinned, or at least, he felt like he was grinning. "Oh, you will. Just wait till I get my chakra working properly again." Rina sighed. "Sure, ninja boy. Whatever you say." Time passed in an odd way within the cave. With no sun or sky to track, Naruto and Rina had nothing but their own banter to fill the silence. And surprisingly, they made it work. At first, it was just Naruto testing his movement, rolling, stretching, and bouncing around like some weird sentient ball of chakra. Rina, not one to be outdone, started mimicking his movements, turning it into an impromptu competition of who could do the most ridiculous tricks. "Check this out," Naruto declared, launching himself off a nearby rock and attempting a mid-air spin. Instead of landing smoothly, he flopped onto the ground like a pancake. Ow! Rina snickered, real graceful, strongest shinobi alive. Oh, shut up. Naruto bounced back up, let's see you do better. Rina took the challenge, propelling herself forward with a sudden burst of speed. She hit the rock, twisted mid-air, and landed perfectly. Naruto blinked. Okay, that was kinda cool. Rina wobbled smugly. Face it, I'm just built different. They kept it up, testing their limits and discovering new tricks. Naruto figured out how to stretch his form in weird ways, while Rina managed to launch herself like a slingshot. It wasn't long before they started messing around with their abilities in other ways. Naruto, being Naruto, tried to recreate his old jutsu in slime form. It didn't go great. His attempt at a Rasengan ended with him splitting into two halves that refused to function properly until he reabsorbed them. Rina laughed at him for a solid 5 minutes. Shut it, I'll get it eventually, Naruto grumbled. Rina, meanwhile, experimented with water jet, to try and move around faster. When Naruto told her he could do something similar with one of his skills, they started making a game of seeing who could move faster than the other. At some point, Naruto got bored and started rambling about his past, telling Rina about ramen, the Ichiraka shop, and how he could eat bowl after bowl without getting sick. You're telling me you survived mostly off noodles, Rina deadpanned. Naruto huffed, it's not just noodles, it's the food of the gods. You don't get it, Rina-chan, ramen is, did you just call me Rina-chan? Maybe. She groaned, we're slimes, you do not get to be weird about honorifics. What, it just slipped out. As their antics continued, they wandered deeper into the cave, not really paying attention to where they were going. It wasn't until Naruto tried launching himself off a rock at full force that things took an unexpected turn. With a mighty boing, Naruto soared through the air, only to smack directly into something solid. Something that rumbled. Rina? Yeah. I think I just hit a wall. That's nice. The wall is breathing. What? A deep, powerful voice filled the cave, shaking the very air around them. You there, can you hear me? The voice echoed through the cavern, its sheer presence shaking both slimes. I said, can you hear me, small ones? It boomed again, making Rina jolt while Naruto instinctively backed up beside her. Hey, it's rude to ignore me, the voice continued, irritation creeping into its tone. Naruto tensed, trying to pinpoint the source. His perception had improved since becoming a slime. But whatever this was, it was far beyond his range. You talking to us, Rina murmured, her form shifting as if she were looking around, despite lacking eyes. You'd best answer me, the voice grumbled, a low, almost growling vibration following its words. Naruto frowned. How were they supposed to answer? He and Rina had a mental link, but that didn't mean they could communicate with some mysterious, booming voice. Hey, the voice snapped again, louder this time, agitation fully apparent. Stop shouting, Baldy, Rina shouted back in retaliation. Naruto internally winced. Probably not a great idea to insult the unknown entity. Then came the sound of something massive shifting in the darkness. A shadow loomed over them, wings slowly unfolding, stretching impossibly wide. The air thickened, humming with restrained power. Then, the roar came. It wasn't just a sound, it was a force, an explosion of dominance and fury that rattled the cave walls. Naruto barely held his ground as Rina let out a mental scream, her form jittering wildly. He quickly positioned himself between her and whatever monster they had angered, making sure she wouldn't bolt. Running would probably just make things worse. You dare call me Baldy, you're rather bold for a mere slime, the voice growled, deeper and far more menacing now. Yep, Rina struck a nerve. Naruto's mind raced as the looming figure became more distinct. This wasn't just some powerful monster. This was something ancient, something that shouldn't be contained in a mere cave. I was trying to be hospitable, but if insults are all you have to offer, perhaps you have a death wish. Naruto quickly cut in, trying to de-escalate before things got worse. That was her bad, we didn't know you could hear our thoughts, but we're also completely in the dark here, literally. We don't perceive things the same way you do. A deep, booming laughter filled the cavern, catching both of them off guard. I thought you were brave, but if you cannot see, then allow me to bestow sight upon you. However, there are conditions. What say you? Naruto relaxed slightly, the sudden shift of anger to laughter confusing him just a bit. The chakra slime began shifting his form in contemplation, while Rina seemed to calm down as well. What kind of conditions? Naruto asked warily. They are simple. Once you gain sight, you must not fear me, and you must visit me from time to time. Naruto and Rina exchanged looks, or rather, they would have if they had proper faces. That's seriously it? Rina asked, skeptical. Yes, you see, I have been imprisoned here for 300 years, and quite frankly, I am exceptionally bored. Naruto could actually sympathize. He had barely lasted a few weeks, months, at most, down here, and he was already getting restless. 300 years alone? That sounded unbearable. Both slimes quickly agreed, and then something shifted. A new skill formed within them both, magic sense, and the moment it activated, everything changed. The darkness lifted, replaced by a world of color and shape. It wasn't exactly the same as Naruto's old vision. But it was clearer than what he had before, more structured. Naruto turned to Rina, now seeing a soft blue blob. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but that was about right. He glanced at his own reflection in a puddle and saw a yellow blob, except his wasn't as smooth as Rina's. His form fluctuated slightly, spiked ridges forming where his hair used to be. It was weird, but at least he wasn't completely unrecognizable. Finally, he turned toward the voice's source. A towering black and blue dragon loomed over them, scales gleaming under the faint cave light, massive wings folded against its body. Its piercing golden eyes studied them with amusement. Holy crap, you're a dragon! Rina exclaimed, her form rapidly shifting in shock. Allow me to introduce myself, the dragon said, ignoring Rina's outburst and offering the best smile a massive dragon could manage. I am Veldora, the storm dragon. One of the 4 true dragons that exist in this world. As if to emphasize his own grandeur, Veldora let out another booming laugh, his voice shaking the ground and walls with just a few deep chuckles. Now then, don't forget our deal, he reminded them, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. Of course not, but we've got to run, so we'll visit another time, Rina quickly said, already shifting to grab Naruto so they could make their escape. Before she could, however, Veldora's voice rang out sharply. Hold it. Rina froze mid-motion. Something is amiss, slimes are usually mindless creatures, yet both of you can think. Are you unique? Naruto and Rina exchanged a glance. Depends on what you mean, Naruto answered, doing his best to form a smirk in his slime form. I'm referring to beings with extraordinary abilities, Veldora clarified, his gaze narrowing slightly. You could say that, Rina chimed in, curiosity piqued. We were both reincarnated here. The dragon's amusement shifted into intrigue. his massive head lowering slightly. Reincarnated, you say? That is quite rare. There are other worlders who were able to come here through magical gates, but this land has never experienced reincarnation, let alone two. Naruto hummed, guess that makes us unique, then. Veldora chuckled again, though this time it was more subdued. Fascinating, perhaps fate has guided you here, then. Naruto wasn't sure about fate, but he had to admit, meeting a dragon was one hell of a way to start this new life. The thought lingered for a moment as he wondered if Veldora could help him get stronger or even find a way out of this cave. But maybe that was a bit too hopeful. Rina rolled forward slightly, snapping out of her own thoughts. You said you were sealed here, could you tell us why? Veldora seemed to brighten at the question, his massive body shifting excitedly. Naruto deadpanned, was this fearsome dragon really that easy to win over just by showing a little interest? Then again, they were probably the only ones who had talked to him in centuries. Yes. My story begins 300 years ago, Veldora said, puffing up his chest. I had accidentally burned down a village. Yeah, sure, accidentally, Naruto muttered to Rina, earning a chuckle from the blue slime. Veldora either didn't hear or chose to ignore them as he continued, and not long after, a so-called hero came seeking to slay me. It seems I may have underestimated my opponent just a bit. Halfway through the battle, I found myself going all out, and yet, I still lost. The dragon let out a deep rumbling growl, clearly displeased with the memory. She was called a hero, blessed with divine protection, and she sealed me away in this cave using her unique skill, unlimited imprisonment. Naruto shifted his gaze past the dragon, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the shimmering energy surrounding Veldora. The rocks in the cave gave off a faint glow, their energy feeding into an invisible barrier that trapped the massive beast. That must have been the unlimited imprisonment skill. Veldora continued, oh, and you may find this interesting, the hero referred to herself as a summon. Summon? Naruto asked, raising what would have been an eyebrow if he had one. Yes, Veldora nodded. A summon is similar to an otherworlder, but rather than being coming here by chance, they are pulled into this world through a ritual that requires at least 30 mages. Before Naruto could respond, Rina practically bounced in place. Sweet, this is sounding even more like a game. Naruto deadpanned at her. But Veldora simply chuckled before continuing. Summons are brought here to serve as weapons for their summoners. From the moment they arrive, a powerful curse binds them, preventing them from ever defying their master's orders. Naruto stiffened at that. It reminded him too much of what Zabuza had once told him about shinobi, how they were nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. He had never believed in that way of thinking. People weren't weapons, they had their own wills, their own paths. But at the same time, Naruto knew the harsh reality, both in his old world and this new one. As long as people had power over others, there would always be those who treated individuals as mere tools. That's seriously messed up, Rina said, frustration clear in her voice. Veldora let out a long sigh, lowering his massive head toward them. Perhaps in your world, but here, such things are simply part of life. In this world, only one thing truly matters, survival of the fittest. Rina looked like she wanted to argue, but Naruto gave her a quick glance, silently telling her to let it go. She huffed but stayed quiet. Instead, she shifted her attention back to Veldora. So, you've been here all alone for 300 years? Yes, Veldora said with a dramatic sigh. And as I've already mentioned, I've been exceptionally bored. Rina hummed in thought before suddenly hopping closer to the barrier. With an eye smile forming in her slime-like features, she spoke in a light-hearted tone. Well then, how about me, you, and Naruto be friends? Veldora's reaction was immediate. A dragon like me, friends with a lowly slime? Rina practically jumped back, startled by his sudden outburst, before bolting behind Naruto. She peeked out, looking ready to apologize, but before she could, Veldora shifted awkwardly, looking almost flustered. For a moment, Naruto just stared. A legendary dragon, one of the 4 true dragons, was acting embarrassed over the idea of making friends? The thought made Naruto chuckle internally. Maybe Veldora wasn't as scary as he looked. With that in mind, Naruto rolled forward, stretching his orb-like body slightly to extend a small limb-like nub. "We are friends," Naruto declared confidently. "You got that, Veldora, there's nothing you can do to change my mind. You're our friend now, so just deal with it." Veldora blinked in surprise before letting out another booming laugh, shaking the cave walls once again. Naruto sweat dropped but stood his ground. After a moment, the dragon extended a massive claw through the barrier, just enough to avoid being harmed by it. Even then, the sheer size of it dwarfed Naruto, probably twice his size at least. Without hesitation, Naruto reached out his small nub and pressed it against the claw in what could only be described as a handshake. And just like that, a bond was formed. Naruto smirked to himself. If he were still in his old world, he'd have some serious bragging rights. A dragon for a friend? That was the kind of thing kids in the academy would have dreamed of. But as much as he enjoyed the idea, he couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Veldora had been locked away in this prison for 3 centuries. Sure, the guy was a little trigger-happy with his flames, but that didn't seem like enough of a reason to lock him up for eternity. Even the Uchiha were known for losing their tempers now and then. Naruto turned toward the barrier, his expression shifting to something more serious. "There has to be a way to break this." "So, what now?" Naruto asked, his voice losing its usual playfulness as he eyed the shimmering seal around Veldora. The dragon tilted his head, confused. "What do you mean?" Rina, who had been watching, seemed to catch on faster than the massive beast. "Oh," she muttered under her breath. Naruto didn't waste time explaining, "I mean this prison. No offense, but we gotta get you out of here. You've already been stuck in this cave for 300 years, that's more than long enough." Veldora blinked in surprise, then let out a booming laugh. "You are a bold one, little slime. But I fear it is impossible. Unlimited imprisonment is an unbreakable skill. Not even I, a true dragon, can escape it." Naruto frowned, not liking that answer. "Yeah, well, I don't believe in impossible. Every jutsu has a weakness, every seal has a crack, there has to be a way." Veldora huffed, amused by Naruto's determination. "Even if you could dispel it, I am still bound by the conditions of the skill. I cannot break free through sheer strength alone, and without external interference, I will remain here forever." Naruto glanced at Rina, who seemed deep in thought. She bounced slightly before speaking up. "What about analyzing the skill? If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to mess with it somehow." The chakra slime gave a nod. "Yeah, that could work, but it would probably require us to analyze and break it from both sides. Like he said, if we only break the barrier, he'll still be trapped." Both Naruto and Rina sighed, frustration creeping in. But before they could dwell on it, a familiar voice cut through their thoughts. "Proposition, there is a way to deactivate the skill and free Veldora." Rina immediately perked up. "Well, then spit it out," she demanded. Veldora blinked in confusion, his massive head tilting slightly. "Why are you two ignoring me and talking amongst yourselves? It's rude." Rina quickly waved him off, murmuring something about jealousy, before returning her focus to Great Sage. The skill continued, explaining that there was indeed a way to free Veldora, but it required her other unique skill. Once the explanation was complete, Rina moved closer to the barrier, looking up at the dragon with determination. "You have to get in my stomach." Naruto let out a tired sigh. That definitely could have been phrased better. Veldora recoiled slightly. "Excuse me?" Rina, oblivious to how weird she sounded, pressed on. "If I use Predator and combine it with Great Sage, I can store you in a separate space inside of me. While you're inside, I'll continuously analyze and break the skill from my end, while you try to break it from yours. And since you'll be in my pocket dimension, you won't die, probably." A deep, rumbling laugh echoed through the cave. Naruto had already noticed this was becoming a pattern with the dragon. Veldora then nodded, his expression filled with excitement. "That is a great idea, I trust you completely. It's far better than sitting here waiting to die. I only had about 100 years left before my magicules ran out anyway." Naruto filed that information away, so that's why the cave was so dense with energy. Seeing Veldora's enthusiasm, Rina bounced in place. "Alright, then I'll just wait." Veldora's voice carried authority, making both slimes pause. "Before we do this, I want to give you both names. And in return, I would like you to give me one as well. The name you give me will act as a family name, while the ones I bestow upon you will be your true names, marks of power. Once named, a monster's strength rises significantly, making them a true force to be reckoned with." Naruto liked the sound of that. And judging by the way Rina was practically vibrating with excitement, she did too. The two slimes huddled together, thinking of a name that would represent all of them, something that symbolized the bond they had just formed. Eventually, they settled on Tempest, which Veldora graciously approved of. Now, it was the dragon's turn. Veldora's massive eyes locked onto Naruto first, his expression contemplative. "How about, Raiga Tempest," he rumbled. Naruto, now Raiga, felt something surge through his core, a rush of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. His body pulsed with power, his magicules shifting and growing in a way that felt completely natural. Then, Veldora turned to Rina. "And for you, Rimuru Tempest." The moment the name was spoken, a similar surge of energy flooded the blue slime's body. Both of them shuddered as their forms stabilized, their magicules expanding exponentially. Naruto, no, Raiga, let out a breath, marveling at the sensation. "That felt weird." Rimuru let out a giddy laugh. "That was amazing, feel like I could take on the world." Veldora grinned. "Good. Now, let's begin." With that, the plan to free the storm dragon Veldora Tempest was officially underway. As expected, their plan proceeded smoothly. However, Raiga was caught off guard when Rimuru completely consumed Veldora, her form expanding until she loomed over him. Her slime body pulsed with immense energy, momentarily flickering with golden light before settling back into its usual hue. "Whoa, that was insane," Raiga muttered, watching as Rimuru seemed to absorb the lingering energy from Veldora. Rimuru flexed her body experimentally. "I can feel him in there, and Great Sage has already started analyzing the barrier. Now we just need time." With Veldora stored safely within Rimuru, the two slimes turned their attention to the rest of the cave. If they were going to leave, they might as well make the most of it. "Since we're here, we should stock up on whatever we can find," Raiga suggested. "Mainly materials." Rimuru bounced in agreement. "Good idea, and with Predator and Skill Forge, we might be able to pick up a few useful abilities along the way." With that, the two began their exploration in earnest. They traveled deeper into the cave, encountering various monsters, giant centipedes, oversized bats, and even a few lesser spirits that roamed the area. Raiga tested out Skill Forge, peering into the essence of his enemies as he fought. He found he could convert some of their abilities into chakra-based techniques, refining them into something uniquely his. In the few weeks he gained chakra manipulation, spider genjutsu, shadow clone, toad style, transformation, bat seal, scorpion combat, reptile genjutsu, and mixtures element, which was an element that originally made from poison, but he was able to peer deep enough to allow him to create different assortments of liquids. Meanwhile, Rimuru was making full use of Predator, absorbing monsters and analyzing their abilities with great sage. This allowed her Poison's Breath, Armored Body, Steel Sticky Thread, and Sonic Vibrance, which allowed her to make sounds. Raiga eventually discovered that he could use Bat Seal for sound making as well. By the time they reached the cave's exit, both slimes had grown significantly stronger, their new abilities making them far more formidable than before. This must be it, Rimuru muttered, staring up at the massive gate that towered over them, seemingly as tall as Veldora himself. The gate was wooden, carved with intricate patterns, and reinforced with steel. The handles were far too high for either slime to reach without shifting their forms. Raiga gave Rimuru a small nod, also concluding that this had to be the exit. It was the only door they had encountered so far. But the real question was, how do we even open it? Rimuru turned toward him, clearly thinking the same thing. What if I just cut it down with water blade, she suggested. Raiga considered it for a moment before shaking his head. If this door was meant to keep Veldora trapped inside, it was likely reinforced with more than just steel. Trying to brute force their way out might not work, and worse, it could attract unwanted attention. Before they could come up with another solution, the door suddenly creaked open. The deep groaning of the heavy wood echoed through the cavern, startling both slimes. Their first thought was who, or what, is opening that door? They quickly got their answer. 3 figures, clearly adventurers, stepped through the entrance. Rimuru and Raiga swiftly hid behind a rock, peeking out to observe the newcomers. The group consisted of a mage in the center, a swordsman to the right, and a rogue to the left. Raiga focused on the rogue as he was the first to speak. "TCH, it's about time this damn thing opened," he muttered, running a hand along the door's surface. The keyhole was so rusted it was nearly impossible to use, the swordsman added with a sigh. His expression turned sour as he examined their surroundings. Not that surprising, though. This place has been abandoned for over 300 years. The mage stepped forward cautiously, gripping her staff. With a flick of her wrist, the tip of the staff began glowing as an orb of light formed. "We shouldn't let our guard down," she warned, scanning the area as if expecting something to jump out at them. "If things go south, we can always escape using the skill we learned." "The first humans we've seen," Rimuru mentally noted to Raiga. "They're probably adventurers, seems about right for this world." Raiga agreed. They looked like a well-balanced team, each covering the other's weaknesses. Either they were here for exploration, or they were after something specific. Yet something bothered him. Why can I understand them? Until now, he and Rimuru had only communicated through thought, and their conversations with Veldora had been through a skill link. These adventurers spoke a completely different language, one neither slime should know. That simple, great beast/sage's voice suddenly cut in, momentarily startling Raiga. "Your use of magic sense has allowed you to interpret sound and intent, automatically translating speech into a language you understand. Additionally, if Rimuru emits a low-frequency sonic vibrance wave while projecting her thoughts, and if Raiga uses Bat Seal to generate thought-based sound waves, you could both communicate back in spoken language. It was a relief to know they didn't have to learn a new language from scratch, but neither slime was eager to start speaking just yet. They were still monsters, after all. For now, they would simply observe. "Alright, you two, get closer so I can activate my stealth art," the rogue said, confusing the hidden slimes. Not even 2 seconds later, the three adventurers vanished, leaving only footprints as they ventured deeper into the cave. "What was that?" Rimuru exclaimed, clearly impressed by the display. "He called it stealth art, right? Imagine the peeping potential, what a disgraceful perv, that I absolutely need to befriend later." Raiga blinked, caught off guard by her outburst. Of all things, he hadn't expected that. Maybe Jiraiya-sensei had been right, women could be just as pervy as men, perhaps even more so. As if realizing she had spoken aloud, Rimuru turned to him, a red tint forming where her cheeks should be. Raiga chose not to comment. Instead, he took the opportunity left by the adventurers and hopped out of the open gate. Finally, they were free. For the first time, they felt fresh air and a warm breeze, though felt was the wrong word. They couldn't taste the air, nor truly experience it like before, but the sensation of wind brushing against their smooth, orb-like bodies was oddly pleasant. Outside the cave, a dense forest stretched in every direction. The area wasn't open, thick trees cast long shadows over the ground, but patches of sunlight still managed to break through. The two slimes hopped around aimlessly, not entirely sure what they were looking for, only knowing that it felt good to be out in the open. But they did have a goal. They had promised Veldora that once he was freed, they would have stories to tell. Which meant plenty of adventures. For Rimuru, that meant exploring this new world. For Raiga, it meant fighting strong opponents and getting stronger. However, before they could get far, a group of scrawny goblins blocked their path. Raiga raised an eyebrow. The goblins looked weak, shaken, like they had suffered hardship after hardship for generations. Their frail frames made them almost laughable as they attempted to stand their ground. Not that Raiga was mocking them, if anything, he was concerned. They didn't look okay, they looked like they needed help. Most of them wore nothing but rags, their bodies covered in dirt and grime. Their matted hair all carried the same dusty brown color, as if they had been bathed in filth their entire lives. And then there were their weapons. Old, broken, and rusted. None of them looked capable of doing any real damage, let alone to him or Rimuru. Raiga felt conflicted. This wasn't what he had expected at all. Were goblins supposed to be like this, or was something wrong here? Neither Rimuru nor Raiga made a move, simply waiting for one of the goblins to speak. Eventually, one of them, possibly the bravest, stepped forward. "We are sorry for stopping you, strong ones, but we must know, do you have some sort of business in the forest?" questioned a blonde goblin. As he spoke, his companions shifted slightly, as if preparing for an attack. Only, from the way they wobbled, it looked like they would just fall onto each other if they tried. Strong ones, Raiga thought to himself. He supposed it made sense, considering how weak the goblins appeared, but he didn't think he and Rimuru were all that powerful yet. Maybe somewhere in the middle, but he was going to change that soon enough. Since they asked, he figured he should answer. Raiga activated his bat seal, preparing to speak, but before he could, Rimuru suddenly shouted. "Hi, it's nice to meet you, I'm Rimuru." The sheer force of her voice shook the trees, sending leaves rustling. The goblins, caught off guard, yelped and tumbled over like dominoes. "We get it, great monster, we already know of your power, please don't hurt us," one of them cried. Rimuru immediately backed up sheepishly. while Raiga shook his head. She must have overthought her words and ended up yelling. After a brief pause, Rimuru refocused and spoke again, this time in a calmer tone. "Sorry about that, what's up?" The blonde goblin hesitated before cautiously picking himself up. "We sensed the presence of a strong monster, so we came out here to investigate." That made Rimuru glance around curiously, while Raiga remained silent, lost in thought. Could they be talking about us? "So, where is it? Did you find it?" Rimuru asked. The goblins gave her an incredulous look. "You must be joking. Even if you two have disguised yourselves as mere slimes, your power is immense." "Well, that confirms it," Raiga thought grimly. If the goblins could sense them just from leaving the cave, then others would as well. That meant they'd be walking targets before long. I need to figure out a way to fix that, fast. The blonde goblin lowered his head respectfully. "Please excuse us, but seeing as you two are so strong, we wanted to see if we could gain your help." Rimuru blinked. "Help with what?" The goblins led them along a narrow, winding path through the dense forest until they reached a small clearing. There, amidst a cluster of dilapidated wooden huts, stood an elder goblin. His skin was a mottled gray, every wrinkle and sagging fold a testament to the years he'd seen and suffered. Clutching a worn staff, the decrepit goblin regarded the two slimes with cautious respect. With wary eyes, the other goblins stood by, ready to defend their elder if necessary. The blonde goblin from before stepped forward alongside the elder and gestured toward a larger hut at the center of the village. "Please come inside, our elder will explain everything." The four of them entered, settling on worn mats across from one another. Silence filled the space as Raiga took the moment to analyze everything they had seen so far. The state of the village was worse than he initially thought. Even if goblins weren't known for having large settlements, this place was barely holding together. The population seemed low, and those who were in any condition to fight looked malnourished and badly injured. By his count, maybe 60 goblins could still hold their own in battle, but even they were in rough shape. It was clear this village had suffered multiple attacks. What he couldn't figure out yet was who or what was attacking them, but he had a feeling they were about to find out. "Welcome to our humble home," the elder rasped, his voice weak but laced with wisdom. "I am the elder of this village." "It's nice to meet you," Raiga responded politely, though his tone quickly shifted to something more serious. "But let's not waste time, this isn't just some casual request for help. Your people are suffering, what's plaguing this village?" His shinobi instincts demanded all the details before he committed to anything. If they were going to help, he needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. The elder and the blonde goblin exchanged glances before nodding in silent agreement. "Have you noticed how unusually active the monsters have been lately?" the elder asked. Rimuru shook her head. "No, not really. Well, about a month ago, our protector vanished without a trace. Ever since, the number of hostile monsters in the area has increased, our village is constantly harassed." Raiga and Rimuru both stiffened slightly at that. Protector, Rimuru quickly connected the dots. It had been roughly a month since she absorbed Veldora. Was he the one keeping the other monsters in check? "We've tried to fight back," the elder continued, sorrow evident in his voice. "But we simply lack the strength and numbers to hold them off. That's why we sought your help," the blonde goblin added, his voice carrying a quiet but firm determination. Rimuru hesitated, looking uncertain, while Raiga's interest only grew. Despite their appearances as simple slimes, he knew they had strength. And seeing this village in such a desperate state stirred something inside him, an old, familiar drive. He had been in situations like this before. People in need, begging for help, and back then, he had never turned away from them. There was no way he'd start now. Just as he was about to speak, Rimuru beat him to it. "I don't know," she muttered, shifting slightly as if embarrassed. "I mean, we're just lowly slimes, it's not like we can really do much to help." Raiga blinked at her, surprised. Was she serious? Before he could call her out, the goblins started chuckling. "You're so modest," the elder said with amusement. "And funny," the blonde goblin added with a grin. Rimuru looked confused, but before she could question them, the elder continued. "I mean no disrespect, but it's simply impossible for a mere slime to emit such an overwhelming aura. It's clear that you're no ordinary monster." The blonde goblin nodded, his earlier amusement replaced with concern. Raiga turned to Rimuru, who still seemed baffled. It made him wonder, did she really not realize how powerful they were? Given that they had spent most of their new lives inside a cave, it was possible neither of them fully understood the extent of their abilities. Now that he thought about it, he hadn't considered it much either. Sure, he knew they weren't weak, but the goblins were reacting as if they were monstrous beings beyond comprehension. "Do you know what they're talking about?" Rimuru asked through their mental link. Raiga answered with a simple no clue, which only deepened their confusion. There was only one way to find out. With a quick request, Great Beast/Sage adjusted their perception, allowing them to view themselves as if they were standing outside their own bodies. What they saw made both of them mentally freeze. Their auras weren't just visible, they were blazing, waves of dense energy radiating from them like an inferno. Compared to the faint, flickering presences of the goblins, they looked like titanic forces of nature. For the first time since arriving in this world, they truly saw themselves. With a quick request to Great Beast/Sage, the two swiftly figured out how to suppress their auras, unknowingly putting most of the goblins outside at ease. The overwhelming pressure that had been suffocating the village dissipated instantly, and the goblins, who had been trembling moments before, now seemed able to breathe freely again. Raiga remained silent, letting Rimuru handle the conversation. She had already told him mentally that she wanted to play this off, and he saw no reason to interfere. It made sense. If they wanted to maintain their image as strong beings, it wouldn't do to let the goblins think they had been unintentionally leaking their aura like reckless fools. Rimuru let out a small hum, then shifted her tone into something more confident, though to Raiga, it was obvious she was still rattled by the revelation of their power. "Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty proud that you all noticed," she said, giving a light bounce. "Not many would have the courage to even speak to beings like us, let alone approach us so boldly." Raiga could practically feel the nervous energy underneath her words, but the goblins didn't seem to pick up on it. Instead, their eyes widened with awe, and murmurs spread among them. "So, it was a test," the blonde goblin muttered in realization. The elder nodded solemnly. Of course, such mighty beings would not simply lose control of their power. They must have been testing our resolve. Raiga barely stopped himself from snorting. That was definitely not what had happened, but he had to admit, it worked out in their favor. If the goblins thought they had been tested and had passed, their loyalty would only deepen. Rimuru, regaining a bit of her composure, gave a small nod. But let's get back on track." Her tone became more businesslike. "What exactly are you dealing with here?" The elder's expression darkened. "The ones who plague us are dire wolves. Ruthless, intelligent beasts that roam the forest in packs. Ever since our protector vanished, they have grown bold, attacking us night after night." The blonde goblin clenched his fists, his jaw tight with emotion. "We fought as best we could, but we lost so many." The elder closed his eyes, his grip on his staff tightening. "Among the fallen, was my son, and his brother. Rimuru stilled, and Raiga felt the atmosphere in the hut grow heavy. The elder took a slow breath, his voice steady despite the pain behind it. He led our warriors in a desperate defense, trying to buy the villagers time to escape. But against their leader, he stood no chance. A tense silence settled over the room. Raiga studied the elder carefully. Despite his frail body, the goblin spirit had not broken. He carried his grief with dignity, using it to push forward rather than allowing it to crush him. Rimuru, no longer playing around, gave a small nod. I see, that's rough. The elder met her gaze. That is why we ask for your aid. If these attacks continue, our village will not survive. Rimuru hummed in thought before tilting her head slightly. Alright, let's say we help you. What exactly are you offering in return? The elder didn't hesitate. Our loyalty. Rimuru blinked. Huh? The elder bowed his head deeply. If you save us, we will serve you. We have little in the way of resources, but we will offer our skills, our labor, and our unwavering devotion. The blonde goblin immediately followed suit, lowering his head in deep respect. We swear it, our lives will be yours to command. Outside, the gathered goblins, who had been listening anxiously, seemed to catch on. One by one, they fell to their knees, their voices rising in unison. Please, we beg of you, save us. Raiga exchanged a glance with Rimuru. The girl had been playing this as an opportunity to negotiate, but it seemed the goblins were already willing to give their everything in return. For a moment, Rimuru said nothing. Then, she let out an exaggerated sigh, crossing her metaphorical arms. Geez, you guys are really putting me on the spot here. Raiga could tell she was still processing the weight of the situation, but he also knew there was no way she'd say no. But before Rimuru could respond, a chilling howl pierced the quiet evening air, its mournful sound echoing through the trees. The sharp, eerie cry was quickly followed by another, and then a third, each howl more menacing than the last. Soon, the forest surrounding the small goblin village was filled with the terrifying chorus of wolves, each one announcing its presence with a blood-curdling howl. Panic spread like wildfire through the village. The goblins huddled together, their eyes wide with fear as they looked to the elder for guidance. The elder and his son exchanged worried glances before quickly making their way to the entrance of the tent. They stepped outside, and the sight that met them confirmed their worst fears. The dire wolves, one goblin shouted, his voice shaking with terror. They're back, they're here to finish us off. Without hesitation, the elder held up a hand to calm his people. Everyone, remain calm, we must not panic. But his words fell on deaf ears as chaos erupted. Goblins were scrambling, shouting in all directions. They're going to eat the whole village, one shrieked in terror. Where can we run? Another cried out in desperation. Raiga stepped outside the tent, and the scene before him was nothing short of chaos. Goblins were scattering in all directions, some desperately trying to find shelter, others cowering in fear. The sense of helplessness was palpable. Raiga turned to Rimuru, his eyes searching for any confirmation of her decision. She looked back at him, her expression showing a mix of determination and uncertainty. With a deep breath, Rimuru positioned herself next to Raiga. That was all the confirmation he needed. Raiga raised his voice, cutting through the panic. Everyone, calm down. His tone was firm, commanding attention, and though his words were simple, there was an undeniable authority in them. For a moment, the goblins hesitated, unsure of what to make of the slime standing before them. Then, as Raiga continued to speak, their fear began to subside, if only slightly. You have nothing to fear, Raiga continued. His voice unwavering. Because we are going to defeat them. Rimuru, her voice calm and soothing, added, "We'll take care of the dire wolves, you'll be safe." Her words, gentle yet powerful, had an immediate effect. The panic that had gripped the village began to dissipate, and the goblins turned their gazes to the two slimes with a mix of hope and gratitude. The elder, still standing at the edge of the crowd, looked from the slimes to the goblins in awe. "So, you will help us?" His voice was filled with disbelief, but underneath it, there was a growing sense of relief. Rimuru and Raiga exchanged a brief glance, neither of them speaking just yet. They took in the faces of the goblins around them. Fear had gripped most of them when they first arrived. But now, after hearing their words, many had a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Raiga's voice broke the silence again. "Yes, we will help you. But know this, the dire wolves won't be an easy fight, we'll need to be ready." The elder, his heart swelling with both gratitude and determination, bowed deeply, his voice filled with sincerity. "We are your loyal servants," he said, his words carrying the weight of a solemn vow. "We will follow you, and we will do whatever it takes to repay your kindness." Rimuru smiled at the elder's pledge, her haughty demeanor softened by the sincerity in his words. "All right then, let's get ready, we'll deal with these wolves and make sure you're safe." Raiga nodded, his mind already shifting to the task at hand. The dire wolves were a challenge, but now, they weren't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for the trust and loyalty of the goblins. With a final glance between the two slimes, the elder, and his people, Raiga turned toward the forest, the sound of the dire wolves' howls still echoing in his ears. Some time quickly passed, and for some reason, the dire wolves had not yet attacked. It made sense though, they likely preferred the cover of night to hide their approach. Taking advantage of the time they had, the goblins and the two slimes quickly set to work, constructing a makeshift defensive barrier that would protect the villagers and allow the slimes to coordinate their efforts to the fullest. Under the calm of the night, with crickets chirping and a lone fire crackling, Raiga and Rimuru stood resolute before the sturdy wooden barricade, while the goblins took up positions behind it. Most of the goblins were armed with bows and arrows, though it was clear they were far from proficient marksmen. It was Raiga's idea to use this defense to mislead the wolves, convincing them that the two slimes posed little threat. Yet he had a more strategic plan in mind. He would personally confront the dire wolf leader, while Rimuru would engage one of its subordinates. This tactic served two purposes. First, it would instill fear and command respect among the dire wolves, and second, it would allow them to seize any extra abilities or insights the battle might offer for later use. As the night deepened, Raiga exchanged a determined glance with Rimuru, steadying himself for what was to come. Minutes later, the high-level monsters arrived. Even from a distance, Raiga could tell which one was the leader. Standing at the forefront was a massive dire wolf, its piercing gaze locked onto the village with an air of dominance. Beside him stood two others. The first was another dire wolf, slightly smaller but marked by an unusual star pattern across its fur. The second, however, wasn't a wolf at all, it was a two-tailed fox. That was strange. It didn't change anything, but it did make Raiga wonder what its place in all this was. Then, the leader let out a resounding howl, a signal for his subordinates to charge. The pack responded instantly, clawed paws tearing up the dirt as they surged toward the village, their howls echoing through the night. Raiga could see the smirk on the alpha's maw. He thought this would be easy. But as the wolves rushed forward, the goblins loosed their arrows. Not that they did much, the dire wolves were too fast. However, that wasn't the real attack. The true threat came from the near-invisible steel threads Rimuru had laced throughout the battlefield at Raiga's request. The first wave of wolves hit them head-on. Some stumbled, their bodies suddenly slashed and torn. Others charged in blindly and were instantly cut down. It wasn't enough to cripple the pack, but it was enough to make them hesitate. Raiga smirked at the sight. Their numbers remained strong. But the psychological effect was just as valuable. The leader's smirk, on the other hand, was gone. His expression twisted into a snarl as he suddenly lunged forward, snapping his powerful jaws through the threads, tearing them apart in an instant. For the ones he couldn't physically break, he simply roared. The sheer force of his voice shattered them. The pack quickly followed his lead, pushing forward, their blood-stained fur ignored as they neared the village. But then, they stopped. They had noticed Raiga and Rimuru before, standing at the village entrance, but something had changed. Now, one of the slimes was no longer a slime. Raiga chuckled, stepping forward, chakra surging through his body. This was what he had been waiting for, a chance to use his transformation in battle. His body shifted, no longer a yellow blob but a fully humanoid form. His long blonde hair flowed behind him, and his eyes gleamed with red slits. His black and red cloak billowed in the wind. To the dire wolves, it was unsettling. To their leader, it was confusing. Raiga reached out, flicking one of the remaining steel threads with a smirk. "Nice skill my friend has, right?" His voice was calm. But each word made the wolves growl. The goblins behind him stared in awe. Even Rimuru seemed a bit impressed. The dire wolf leader narrowed his eyes. Raiga tilted his head. "Come on, you can still talk this out. If you submit, no more of your pack has to die." Finally, the leader responded, his voice a deep, guttural growl. "We will not submit," his fangs bared. "The injuries to my pack are a small price to pay for their bellies to be full once I rip you apart, human." Raiga sighed, shaking his head. "First off, technically, I'm not human. Secondly," his smirk returned, "how about this? Just you and me. One-on-one, if I win, you and your pack submit. If you win, I'll let you eat the goblins." A few goblins gasped in fear, but the elder remained composed, his trust in the slimes unwavering. The leader didn't answer immediately, but his pride was clear. He wasn't going to back down, he would take the challenge, even if it cost him his life. The dire wolf leader let out a low growl, his eyes burning with challenge. His instincts screamed that this wasn't just any ordinary fight. Raiga was no mere human, no ordinary monster. And yet, his pride as a leader, as an alpha, refused to let him back down. After a moment, he gave his answer. "I accept," his voice rumbled like thunder. "But do not think for a second that I will lose." Raiga's smirk widened. "That's the spirit." He rolled his shoulders, letting his chakra flare up slightly. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't give me a real fight." The wolves behind their leader took a few steps back, giving them space. The goblins, though still nervous, watched intently. Rimuru crossed her arms, standing at ease but fully prepared to jump in if needed. Then, silence. The night air felt thick with tension, every eye locked onto the two figures standing apart from the battlefield. And then, the dire wolf leader moved first. In an instant, he became a blur, his massive form cutting through the air with terrifying speed. His claws gleamed with an eerie glow, energy coating them as he slashed at Raiga with enough force to split a boulder in half. Raiga barely tilted his head, dodging by the smallest margin. At the same time, he moved in, twisting his body and catching the wolf midair with a firm grip. The dire wolf snarled, jaws snapping at his arm in retaliation, but Raiga tightened his hold, forcing its mouth shut with his bare hands. Then, with a flicker of strength, he slammed the beast into the ground. The earth cracked beneath the impact, dust and debris shooting into the air. But the leader wasn't finished. Snarling, he twisted his body and kicked off the ground, launching himself away just in time to avoid Raiga's follow-up strike. His escape was cut short when Raiga was already upon him, moving faster than expected. The wolf barely evaded a devastating punch, only for Raiga's fist to collide with a tree behind him. The massive trunk splintered and toppled with a deafening crash. Raiga blinked, momentarily glancing at his fist. That was way stronger than I expected, he thought mentally, as he began to focus on his hand. The goblins and wolves alike watched in stunned silence. Yeah, I need to refine this body's control, Raiga mentally sighed. I'm too used to my old strength. This new form is on a different level, especially if I was only trying to use 1% of my old strength. A growl brought him back to the fight. The dire wolf was already preparing to strike again. Raiga didn't give him the chance. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a green blob of liquid soaring through the air. Special skill, Mixture Element. The sticky substance was designed to ensnare his opponent, restricting movement. The dire wolf dodged on instinct, but Raiga was already predicting his next move. Another blob shot forward, cutting off his escape. The wolf hesitated, barely managing to avoid the second trap, but it was all Raiga needed to box him in. Raiga lunged, fist cocked back, only for the dire wolf to unleash a thunderous roar. The force of the sound pushed Raiga back slightly, giving the wolf just enough space to escape again. Raiga grinned, excitement flaring in his red-slit eyes. The dire wolf leader growled lowly, his breaths coming heavier now. His movements had become more sluggish, his stamina waning. Raiga could see it, the fight was already won. Still, he wanted to end it in style. The blonde blurred forward, effortlessly dodging the wolf's final desperate swipes and snapping jaws. The leader's attacks became more frantic, his strikes losing precision, until finally, Raiga delivered a swift, crushing kick to his side. The dire wolf was sent flying. He crashed through a tree, the impact sending wood splinters in every direction. Before he could hit the ground, a green blob shot out, pinning him to the remains of the broken trunk. Raiga approached, rolling his shoulders as he stretched his arms. Damn, I'm way too rusty for this. That should have been over a lot faster. A deep, wounded growl was his only response. Raiga laughed lightly, the whisker marks on his face stretching with his smirk. He crouched slightly, his crimson gaze locking onto the wolf's. So, guess that means you and your pack submit now, right? The dire wolf's golden eyes still burned with defiance. Never, he spat, my pack will destroy you, his words cut off in an instant. Raiga had already outstretched his hand, a bat seal glowing on his palm. A high-frequency sonic wave burst forth, crashing into the wolf's body, rattling his very bones. The leader twitched violently, his body unable to resist the overwhelming sound waves. His struggles weakened, until finally, he slumped forward, dead. Raiga exhaled, retracting his arm. A part of him had hoped the wolf would submit, but he was too stubborn. And in this world, stubbornness meant death. With a quick motion, his body reverted back to its true slime form. He turned toward the rest of the dire wolves, his crimson eyes sweeping over the pack. So, he began, his voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable weight. You all will listen to me and my friend now, correct? Silence, then, as one, the dire wolves bowed. Raiga smirked before turning his gaze to the limp body of the defeated dire wolf leader. Great beast, activate skill forge, let's see if there's anything useful here. The world around him shifted, his vision flooded with the swirling blue of magicules. The sheer brightness of it momentarily catching him off guard. He had almost forgotten how overwhelming it was when using this ability, but it was always worth it. Race skill and basic skill detected. Raiga raised an eyebrow, not exactly impressive, but it was still worth checking. There was always a chance he could adapt something to complement his ninja techniques. Race skill, connected minds, links the thoughts of a pack, allowing seamless communication, additional effects unknown. That could prove useful. It would eliminate the need for verbal commands in battle, allowing for faster coordination. However, before he got ahead of himself, he turned his attention to the basic skill. It was a simple earth element ability, not exactly his style, but elemental techniques were always valuable. Even if earth release wasn't his preference, he could still find a way to integrate it into his arsenal. As for connected minds, he figured it would be best utilized as a seal rather than a passive ability. A seal would allow him to regulate and possibly modify its functions, expanding its potential beyond mere telepathic communication. With that settled, the battle officially ended. And time passed quickly. Now, Raiga and Rimuru stood before their new followers, the goblin elder positioned beside them. A mass of goblins and dire wolves gathered before them, standing side by side, remarkably unbothered by the fact that just hours ago, they had been enemies. A war had nearly broken out between them, yet now they stood as one. Raiga sighed, the brightness of the morning only deepening his thoughts. The battle had gone far too easily. If not for the blessings of Veldora and the skills they had acquired, things could have ended very differently. Luck had been on their side, but luck wasn't something they could rely on forever. A sudden noise from Rimuru brought him back to the present. The blue slime cleared her throat, silencing the crowd with a simple gesture. On the surface, she looked composed, exuding confidence in her new leadership role. In reality, she was screaming at Raiga through their mental link. What the hell do we do? This was never supposed to turn out like this. Raiga didn't move, but he could practically feel the panic radiating off her. Sure, building a village sounded fun, but this is different. We stopped a war, and now our enemies are supposed to be our people? There's got to be some resentment still lingering between them. For the first time, Rimuru turned to Raiga, looking for answers. Raiga, however, just stood there, sweat dripping down his temple at her internal meltdown. Say something, weren't you training to be the leader of a village? What do we do? Raiga didn't answer right away. Technically speaking, he hadn't been training to be a leader. Sure, the Hokage was the village head, but his own training had always been focused on strength, not politics or governance. Leadership wasn't just about power. So, he gave the best answer he could. He shrugged. Rimuru's expression deadpanned, her translucent form somehow managing to twitch in frustration. We're doomed. Raiga let out a long sigh before shifting his gaze back to the gathered monsters. He took his time choosing his next words. No matter what, this wasn't something he could decide alone. I'm not the only leader here. His tone was calm, reassuring. It helped ease Rimuru's nerves, if only slightly. The yellow slime then turned to his companion, a small grin forming. You're overthinking this. If you actually look at them, they don't seem too worried about working together. Our presence alone is keeping them unified. Still, it wouldn't hurt to encourage a little more cooperation. I say we find a way to reinforce that bond, but I'm not exactly sure how. He trailed off sheepishly. Rimuru hummed in thought before glancing back at the gathered monsters. She took a deep breath, not that she needed to, but it helped steady her nerves. Since we have an even number of goblins and wolves, we could pair them up, one goblin, one wolf. That way, they'll have to work together and watch each other's backs. Raiga blinked before chuckling, wow, you sure you were just a desk worker in your past life? Rimuru gave a mental laugh before responding. Problem solving was part of the job, but don't get too comfortable. After we pair them up, we have a lot more to deal with. Raiga nodded internally, already noticing the deeper issues, mainly the goblins' poor living conditions. Well, you lead the way, I'll follow. I'm not exactly big on being a co-leader yet, haven't trained for it. Once the pairs were assigned, the goblins and wolves regrouped in front of Raiga and Rimuru. However, Raiga quickly noticed that two creatures remained unpaired, the son of the dire wolf leader and the two-tailed fox that had piqued his interest. Rimuru, not noticing Raiga's distraction, addressed the crowd. Now that that's done, we need to focus on the essentials: food, shelter, defenses, and training. Raiga stepped forward, adding, "We'll need different groups working on each task. Rimuru and I will divide the workload. I'll focus on the defenses, as well as beginning training those of you who show promise in combat, developing different fighting styles based on your abilities." Rimuru turned to him in mild surprise, to which Raiga responded with a smirk. He was a shinobi, of course, he'd start rebuilding those skills here. Even if the monsters weren't suited for his ninja techniques, he could still teach them self-defense or find others to train them in different styles. Before moving forward, Rimuru suddenly paused, her gaze locking onto one of the goblins. A realization struck her. "Wait, you guys don't have names, do you?" The goblin elder nodded blankly. Rimuru turned back to the gathered monsters. "Let's change that, it'll be much easier if you all have names." The crowd fell into stunned silence. Raiga raised an eyebrow, not seeing what the big deal was. It was just a name, after all. Then, one of the goblins hesitantly called out, "Are you sure?" Rimuru nodded without hesitation. In an instant, the silence shattered into uproarious cheers. Goblins and wolves alike celebrated wildly, further confusing Raiga. He glanced at Rimuru, who returned his look with the same uncertainty. Despite their confusion, the naming process began. At first, they put real thought into each name. The elder was named Rigurd, after his eldest son who had died protecting their people. His remaining son was named Rigger in honor of his late brother. But as the process dragged on, their creativity quickly deteriorated. Soon, they were just adding random syllables to gob or picking names based on whatever came to mind. Eventually, they moved on to the wolves and the lone fox. The goblin elder warned them about naming too many monsters, but neither of them saw any harm in it. They named the wolf leader's son Ranga. Then, Raiga took the lead in naming the fox, giving it the name of someone dear to him, someone he wished had been here with him. Kurama. But those were the last names they managed to give before their vision blurred, exhaustion finally catching up to them. They passed out on the spot. For 3 days, they drifted in and out of consciousness, barely aware of their surroundings. It wasn't until the 4th day, at the break of dawn, that they finally awoke, feeling completely revitalized. "Behold, we have recovered," Rimuru declared dramatically. Raiga let out a sigh, sweat dropping at his co-leader's theatrics. During their rest, they had learned an important lesson: naming monsters consumed a massive amount of magicules. Great Beast and Great Sage had even broken down exactly how much had been drained from them. The revelation left them wondering why no one had stopped them. Then again, considering the sheer excitement the goblins and wolves had shown, perhaps no one had thought to intervene. Before they could dwell on it further, a new voice called out, "It seems you're finally awake, Lord Rimuru, Lord Raiga." Both slimes turned toward the speaker, and were immediately taken aback. Standing before them was an almost gorgeous goblin woman, bowing respectfully. She wore the same tattered rags as the rest of the goblins, though they did little to conceal her figure. Light purple hair cascaded down her back, accentuating her curves as she bent forward. Raiga, involuntarily, felt heat rise to his face. When did goblins get this attractive? Rimuru, meanwhile, seemed somewhat irked by the sight of the unfamiliar goblin girl. Before either of them could ask anything, the goblin woman straightened and offered a small smile. I will fetch the elder. With that, she turned and gracefully exited the tent. Rimuru was the first to break the silence. That was weird. Raiga, still recovering, gave a slow nod. Yeah, I didn't think there were any cute goblins in this village, but now I'm really curious about what happened while we were asleep. As he turned to his co-leader, he noticed Rimuru had a faint blush, accompanied by an unmistakable look of annoyance. A slime-like eyebrow lifted on Raiga's face. What's her deal? We just woke up, why is she already irritated? You okay? He asked, his questioning tone only making Rimuru sigh. I'm fine, she muttered, looking away. Before either of them could press further, another figure made their presence known, causing both slimes to startle. A towering, insanely muscular goblin entered the tent, radiating an overwhelming aura of pride. The man flexed dramatically before them, his sculpted form gleaming under the light as he struck a pose. Greetings, Lord Raiga, Lord Rimuru, he said confidently, smirking as he flexed his arms together. Rimuru flushed and immediately looked away. Raiga, however, just raised an eyebrow, trying to process what he was looking at. Okay, I know for a fact you weren't here before, Raiga said bluntly. Who are you, and who was that goblin girl that just left? The muscular goblin laughed dismissively. It's me, Lord Raiga. Something about his voice sounded familiar, then it clicked. Goblin Elder, is that you? Raiga asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. The goblin grinned, flexing once more. Yes. It is I, Rigard. The two slimes' eyes widened in shock. In just 3 days, the frail, elderly goblin had transformed into a towering, muscular warrior. Wait a second, weren't you an old man 3 days ago? Rimuru shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. Rigard grinned, striking another dramatic pose. Yes, I was once this village's old relic, but after receiving a name, I evolved. You see, when monsters are given names, they transform. Growing stronger and taking on new forms. He gestured proudly at himself. All those you have named have changed for the better, gaining new strength and abilities. Raiga couldn't help but smirk. This was huge, it meant the goblins and wolves had even greater potential now. Training them for combat would be much easier if they had the capability to develop new powers. It also explained his and Rimuru's own strength. Since they were named by Veldora, it was no wonder they were so powerful. No wonder the goblins had been so excited about receiving names. It was more than just an identity, it was power. And in exchange for some magicules, a fair trade. Just as Raiga was about to voice his thoughts, a thunderous boom shook the hut. Something burst through the walls, sending dust and debris flying. Smoke filled the air as the sound of multiple tails whipping around echoed through the tent. As the dust cleared, the two slimes were met with an awe-inspiring sight. A massive 9-tailed fox stood before them, its fur gleaming, 2 spiraling horns curving from its head. Beside it was an equally imposing wolf, its fur marked with a star-shaped symbol, a single twisting horn protruding from its temple. The sheer pressure radiating from both beasts made the slimes pause for a moment. And yet, Rigard didn't stop posing, even as wind from the wagging tails kicked up around him. Master, you are awake, both beasts called out at once, only to immediately turn on each other, growling. The fox, whom Raiga could only assume was Kurama, snarled first. Master Raiga is far more important, let that mutt worry about itself. The wolf let out a deep, rumbling laugh. I scoff at you, brother. Master Rimuru is the one we should be concerned about, Raiga should be removed. Kurama bared his fangs. Oh, I see how it is, Master Raiga defeated your father, so now you want revenge. The wolf's eyes narrowed. Father was an arrogant fool. But Master Rimuru granted me, and my entire pack, a name. The Tempest Wolves serve Rimuru, not Raiga. Kurama's tail swayed. Then brother, I believe our rivalry begins here. I've always wanted to lead a pack of my own, but father and I never found another like me. The wolf met his gaze evenly. Then I wish you luck, my new rival. Raiga blinked. Okay, that was weird, but before he could fully process the conversation, the two creatures immediately turned their attention back to fussing over him and Rimuru, completely obliterating what remained of the hut in their excitement. After the dust settled, literally, the slime spent time with their newly evolved village. Their return was celebrated with cheers and joyous shouts, the monsters lifting them into the air as they moved through the village. As they observed each named monster, it became clear just how much had changed. Not long after, Raiga found himself alone with Kurama. He had asked to speak privately, while Rimuru had taken Ranga, the newly appointed leader of the Tempest Wolves, somewhere else. He had a lot to discuss with his new companion. Raiga sat on a rock near the edge of the village, watching as Kurama rested beside him. The massive fox lay curled up, his 9 tails flicking lazily behind him, golden eyes locked onto the yellow slime with quiet curiosity. He didn't speak, didn't move more than necessary, just observed. Raiga had been drawn to him from the start. During the battle, while the wolves fought in a pack, Kurama had been different. He wasn't reckless like the goblins, nor was he instinct-driven like the wolves. His movements were calculated. Precise. Even when he didn't fight directly, he was always watching, always thinking. You were the first one I noticed, Raiga finally said. Kurama's ears twitched. His gaze unwavering. You weren't just attacking for the sake of it, you were waiting, watching. You think before you act. Kurama exhaled through his nose. Instinct only takes you so far, if you don't adapt, you die. Raiga smirked, sounds like you've had a rough past. Kurama closed his eyes for a moment before speaking. I wasn't born into a pack like the wolves. My mother was the last of an old bloodline, foxes that once ruled these forests before the wolves took over. His voice was even, but there was an unmistakable bitterness beneath it. She tried to raise me in hiding, but we were always being hunted. In the end, she died buying me time to escape. Raiga didn't say anything. Simply letting the fox continue. I learned quickly that being alone meant being weak. I had no pack, no allies, just myself. The wolves saw me as a threat, an outsider. When I got stronger, I wanted to challenge their leader, the one you killed. His claws dug into the dirt slightly, but he was too strong. So I waited, I watched. He turned his piercing gaze back to Raiga, then you arrived. Raiga chuckled, and I killed him before you could. Kurama huffed, something like amusement flickering in his eyes. Yes, you stole my revenge. Raiga tilted his head. So, you mad about it? Kurama shook his head, no. Because when you gave me a name, for the first time, I felt like more than just a wandering beast. Raiga's smirk faded slightly as something unspoken passed between them. A creature born into expectations, forced to survive alone, carrying the weight of a past he never asked for. Sounded too familiar. Raiga exhaled, meeting Kurama's gaze. You know, you don't have to be the last. Kurama's ears perked up. Raiga smirked, if you want a pack of your own, why not start here? Kurama blinked, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, slowly, a sharp-toothed grin spread across his face. Heh, I think I like you, Master Raiga. Raiga scoffed. But he didn't deny the warmth in his chest. Damn right you do. Kurama chuckled, stretching out his limbs before curling his tails around himself once more. I never had anyone to follow before, but I'll follow you, if you're worthy of leading me. Raiga grinned, then let's see if I am. The slime sat in silence, watching as Kurama rested beside him, his tail slowly swaying with the breeze. The weight of their conversation still lingered in his mind, heavier than he expected. He hadn't planned on getting attached to any of the monsters here, not like this. Sure, he was going to train them, build them up, make sure they were strong enough to survive. But bonding, that wasn't something he thought he'd do. Yet here he was. Kurama's story struck a chord he didn't want to acknowledge. The way the fox had survived alone, carrying the burden of a bloodline he never asked for, it was painfully familiar. Raiga had never had a clan, never had a family in the way most shinobi did, but he knew what it was like to be expected to live up to a legacy. Even in this world, where he was no longer a shinobi, that weight hadn't disappeared. After a few days, the challenges began. Raiga and Rimuru had established 3 basic rules to ensure that the monsters wouldn't misuse their newfound strength to harm each other or others unless necessary. With that, the various groups for different tasks were formed. Rimuru managed to organize teams for gathering food, focusing on hunting for meat and foraging berries for the village. However, the team responsible for shelter and clothing ran into difficulties. This made Raiga consider using a crafting seal to create shelters, but Great Beast informed him that it wasn't possible, at least, not yet. However, it hinted that upgrading the skill might make it feasible, though neither he nor Great Beast knew how to accomplish that just yet. On Raiga's end, things were progressing smoothly. He successfully crafted basic weapons and tools, cut down trees, and stored materials for later use. He even used some of the lumber to build fortifications around the village, expanding their territory. The only setback was that, despite their power-ups, many goblins still struggled with cowardice. Fortunately, with Rigurd's help, Raiga identified the ones best suited for training, giving him 12 promising students who would become his elite warriors. Before gathering his students, he first held a session training goblins and wolves to fight in tandem. It was a simple but effective style that emphasized teamwork between man and beast. He hoped that once the rest of the goblins saw his students' progress, they'd be inspired to grow stronger as well. Still, he had to admit, not all monsters were meant for battle. Many had other useful skills, and he was fortunate to find even 12 out of the 100 that now lived in the village. Among his new students, the first was Gobta. Despite his goofy nature and unchanged appearance, Raiga saw immense potential within him using Skill Forge. Gobta had the greatest energy reserves among the goblins, hinting at hidden strength waiting to be unleashed. Next was Gobli, one of the 3 goblinas in his class. She ranked second in raw strength and displayed impressive learning ability. If Raiga truly aimed to reshape the shinobi world, she would no doubt be an S-rank ninja in this new land. Rigurd's second son, Rigor, was also among the chosen. While his energy wasn't as overwhelming as the others, he had natural leadership qualities, courage, and an affinity for control, traits Raiga valued highly. Then there was Sasuke, a goblin Raiga personally named. His reserved nature and hidden bonds with others reminded Raiga of his old comrade. Luckily, Sasuke wasn't too prideful to admit he wanted to grow stronger. Raiga just hoped to help him open up to others. Sakura was another named goblin, a goblina whose bright pink hair mirrored his old friend. However, that's where the similarities ended. Unlike the Sakura he once knew, this one wasn't a fangirl. She had no choice but to join the training because she lacked the skills to forage for food like the others. Gobten was the last Goblina, named after Tenten due to her natural talent with tools. Raiga believed she had the potential to become one of the best weapon specialists in this world. However, she had a severe aversion to blood, likely stemming from her traumatic experience with the old dire wolves. This also explained her initial hostility toward her new wolf partner. The rest of his students consisted of the Tempest Wolves. While he hadn't given them individual names, they all went by Tempest, which was bound to get confusing. Regardless, they would be key in strengthening the village's defenses. Raiga scanned the faces of his students, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. Despite their inexperience, they had adapted to the shinobi basics surprisingly well. He could already see the potential paths each of them might take, some as skilled warriors, others as tacticians, and perhaps even a few as future leaders. "All right, my students," Raiga called out, his voice carrying authority and excitement. "Right now, you're at the genin level of shinobi. It may seem low, but this is only the beginning. With continued training, you will become much stronger. In just a few days, you've learned how to handle shinobi weapons and understand the basics of what it means to be a ninja." He let that sink in for a moment before continuing, "Soon, we'll be diving deeper into your training, but before that, there will be a test. Consider it your first real challenge, be prepared." He paused, glancing around. "Any questions?" Gobta raised a hand almost immediately. What happens if we fail the test?" Raiga smirked. "Simple, you'll train even harder until you pass." A few of the goblins gulped, while the wolves only wagged their tails, seemingly excited by the prospect. Sasuke crossed his arms. "What kind of test are we talking about?" Raiga's smirk widened. "You'll find out soon enough." That earned a mix of groans and murmurs, but Raiga could see the determination in their eyes. They were ready, or at least, they thought they were. But the moment Raiga finished speaking, murmurs turned into bickering. "What if the test is unfair?" Sakura huffed, arms crossed. Gobta scratched his head. "I mean, as long as it's not too hard, we should be fine, right?" Sasuke scoffed. "That's a weak way of thinking, you should want the test to be hard." Gobli stepped forward. "And what if someone isn't ready, are they just left behind?" The argument quickly spread. Gobten was muttering about how she wouldn't work with wolves, while Rigger and another goblin debated if they should spar each other beforehand. Even the wolves were getting involved, growling and snapping at each other over territory nonsense. Raiga sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This wasn't what he wanted. Sure, a little competition was good, but they were already dividing themselves. He thought he had been making progress, but maybe he was going about this all wrong. His thoughts drifted back to his time as a shinobi. No matter how strong a team was, if they didn't trust each other, they would never succeed. He had hoped they would naturally learn this through training. But maybe he had been too focused on turning them into warriors rather than comrades. Shaking his head, he let out a sharp whistle. Enough, the noise snapped everyone's attention back to him. He exhaled, glancing over them. "This isn't going to work if you're already arguing over nothing. If you want to succeed, you need to start thinking as a team, not just as individuals." He didn't wait for a response. Instead, he turned and walked away. "Training's done for today, think about what you really want out of this." Without another word, he left, making his way toward the village. Maybe Rimuru would have some advice, or at least, a distraction. Raiga found Rimuru easily, just in time to see yet another unstable structure collapse into a heap of wood and debris. "Damn it," Rimuru yelled in frustration, completely unaware of Raiga's presence. He watched for a moment, debating whether to speak up, before finally stepping forward. "You okay?" The blue slime jumped slightly before letting out an exasperated sigh. "Yeah, I'm fine," Rimuru muttered, looking down at the mess before glancing back at Raiga. Seeing his concerned expression, she sighed again, "Really, I'm fine. It's just, these shelters aren't working, I have to admit, goblins just aren't meant to be builders." Raiga had figured as much. Even with their newfound strength, the goblins were still inexperienced. It was no different from his own struggles. His students were strong, but their teamwork was a mess. They had potential, but their lack of discipline made progress slow. If they couldn't work together, they wouldn't last in a real fight. Maybe they both needed a fresh approach. Or better yet, someone who could help them solve their problems. But as far as he knew, he and Rimuru were on their own out here. "I get it," Raiga said sincerely. "Things aren't exactly going how I'd like either." He paused, considering his next move. Should he push forward with his students or rethink his approach entirely? Then, an idea struck him. Maybe what they both needed was a change of pace. "What if we switched?" he suggested, turning to Rimuru with a smirk. "I take a shot at fixing your problem, and you try handling mine." Rimuru blinked at him, tilting her body slightly in thought. "You want me to deal with your students, you do realize I don't know the first thing about shinobi training, right?" Raiga smirked, "And I don't know anything about building houses, but here we are." Rimuru let out a dry chuckle. "Fair point." She bounced slightly, as if shrugging, "All right, deal, but don't come crying to me if you can't figure out the shelters." "I won't," Raiga assured her. "But don't be surprised if my students run circles around you." Rimuru laughed at that, though Raiga wasn't entirely joking. If nothing else, it would be interesting to see how she handled them. Maybe a different perspective was exactly what they all needed. With their swap settled, Raiga turned toward the collapsed shelters, rolling up his sleeves. He had no idea where to start, but he'd figure it out. That's what shinobi did, after all. At least that was what he told himself in the beginning. He was really out of his mind with the idea of a switch. He had no clue what he was doing, and it seemed like the Goblina would do a whole lot better without him, which still wouldn't make a stable shelter for anyone. After the massive fail of what was his first house, he quickly decided that they needed outside help. Luckily there had been a dwarf village not too far away from this area, to him anyway. He had learned this from Rigard, who gave him a map to find his way towards the dwarfs. He took Kurama and left to find the place, hoping that the village's skill would be enough to build some simple houses for their people. Honestly, he didn't know what he had been thinking. Shinobi were meant to fight, not build houses, and if his miserable attempt wasn't proof of that, he didn't know what was. Raiga found himself waiting in a slow-moving line leading into the dwarf village. He had left Kurama in the forest, knowing the massive fox had nowhere to hide and would only draw unnecessary attention. The line was filled with all sorts of beings, humans, monsters, lizard men, and even a stray cat, which seemed oddly out of place. Then again, he wasn't exactly one to judge. Considering he was currently in his slime form. He sighed to himself, boredom creeping in as the line barely moved an inch. He just wanted to get this over with, but at this rate, it felt like he'd be standing here all day. Just as he was about to step forward, a human suddenly cut in front of him. "Hey, no cutting," Raiga said, keeping his voice calm despite the irritation seeping in. The man barely reacted. He glanced back with a blank expression before turning away as if Raiga wasn't even there. Raiga sighed, right, he was still in slime form. "Hey, down here. I'm the slime you just cut in front of. This time, the human looked at him, though his expression remained completely uninterested. Wow, a talking slime, must be rare, the man muttered, more to himself than to Raiga. Raiga narrowed his eyes. There was no way this guy was thinking of selling him, was there? Come on, little guy, I'll take good care of you, the man added, pulling out a small knife. Raiga's irritation flared into full-blown anger. Without a word, he transformed, his body stretching and shifting until he stood in his human form, blonde hair swaying slightly in the wind. The sudden change silenced the crowd, and for the first time, the man seemed to realize he had made a mistake. I'll say this once, Raiga began, his blue eyes burning with annoyance. Leave me out of your get-rich-quick scheme. Sorry, not happening, the man sneered. You're even rarer now that I see you've got some power, and besides, he snapped his fingers, and 4 more figures stepped forward, forming a loose circle around Raiga. It's 5 against 1. Raiga took a quick glance at the newcomers, stereotypical adventurers. A swordsman, a rogue, a mage, and some kind of brawler. Before he could even respond, the first man lunged with his knife while the mage fired off a quick fireball from the side. Raiga dodged both attacks with ease, his whisker marks twitching slightly as a smirk crept onto his face. In one fluid motion, he caught the knife-wielding man's wrist, yanked him forward, and sent him flying with a powerful kick. The man crashed into one of his own teammates, both of them collapsing to the ground with a loud thud and pained groans. Raiga barely had time to enjoy the sight before another attacker rushed in. Unnoticed by the mage, the knife his teammate had dropped was now falling through the air. With precise timing, Raiga caught the blade mid-fall and slashed it across the approaching mage's chest. It wasn't deep enough to be lethal, but it sent the spellcaster flying backward, knocking him out cold. As the knife cracked and shattered in his grip, Raiga found himself momentarily captivated by the way the broken metal gleamed in the light. It was just reflective enough for him to catch sight of the next 2 attackers rushing him from behind. The swordsman and rogue came at him together, weapons raised. Without missing a beat, Raiga pivoted, grabbed them both by their collars, and slammed them into the ground. The impact was enough to knock them unconscious instantly. He exhaled, shaking his head. If this is what most humans are like, he muttered to himself, I'm glad Rimuru and I didn't make any rules about not killing them. Not that he needed to go that far, just a solid beating was enough to make them think twice. Raiga let out a sigh of relief, but before he could take a proper breath, a gruff voice called out. Stop right there. The blonde turned around to see a group of armored dwarves, their weapons at the ready. He frowned slightly, confused at first, before realizing they were looking directly at him with suspicion. Instead of making things worse, Raiga shifted back into his chakra slime form, his small body bouncing slightly as he landed. What's wrong? He asked, tilting his head. The dwarves didn't answer. Instead, 2 of them stepped forward, grabbed him without hesitation, and began carrying him toward the village gates. Raiga didn't struggle. He could easily break free, but he was curious where this was going. If he was in trouble for something, it was better to figure out why first. Apparently, it landed him in a cell. The cold stone walls and iron bars surrounded him, a single torch flickering dimly outside the room. Raiga sat in silence, waiting as a few guards stood nearby, their eyes fixed on him. After a few minutes, one of them finally spoke. You caused quite a commotion back there, slime. Raiga blinked. You mean defending myself? Attacking humans in our city isn't taken lightly, another guard grumbled. Raiga scoffed. Oh, right. So, I was supposed to let them kidnap and sell me? Makes perfect sense. The first guard narrowed his eyes. We don't have evidence of that. All we saw was you taking down 5 men in broad daylight. Raiga crossed his arms, his small slime body shifting slightly. You think I attacked them for fun? Maybe ask around before jumping to conclusions. Another guard huffed. Even if they did try to capture you, excessive force isn't tolerated here. Raiga's eye twitched. Excessive? They pulled a knife on me first. They barely had any weapons, one guard shot back. Raiga rolled his eyes. Yeah, because a knife, a sword, a mage casting fire, and a rogue trying to stab me in the back don't count as weapons. The captain of the guards stepped forward with a sigh. Regardless of what happened, you're an outsider. We can't just take your word over 5 wounded men. Raiga let out a bitter chuckle. So, because I actually know how to fight, I'm the bad guy? If I had let them win and they dragged me off in chains, would you be throwing them in a cell instead? The guards didn't answer right away, exchanging glances. One of them hesitated before muttering. That's not the point. Raiga scoffed. Sounds like it is. This whole thing screams, might makes right, only when it's convenient for you. The captain rubbed his temple, clearly growing frustrated. Look, slime, Raiga, he corrected sharply, I have a name. The captain exhaled slowly. Raiga, this isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about keeping order. You fought in the streets, and that's a problem, no matter the reason. Raiga sighed, finally looking away. He could tell arguing more wouldn't change anything. Fine, whatever. Before the conversation could continue, a dwarf suddenly rushed in, looking panicked. Captain, we've got trouble. The frontline soldiers are injured, badly. We need reinforcements and medical aid immediately. The captain straightened. How bad? We're losing men fast. We don't have enough potions to treat everyone. Raiga perked up at that. I can help with that. The guards turned to him with skeptical looks. What are you talking about? Raiga lifted one of his slimy arms, and in an instant, several glowing bottles appeared, neatly stacked beside him. Potions, he said simply, more than enough to get your guys back on their feet. The dwarf who had rushed in looked at the bottles in shock before quickly gathering them up. This will really help, thank you, he sprinted off without another word. Raiga smirked. See, I'm not such a bad guy. The captain crossed his arms. That doesn't mean you're free to go. Raiga sighed as he slumped against the stone wall of his cell. Figures. The chakra slime leaned back against the cold stone wall of his cell, his thoughts a tangled mix of frustration and contemplation. He replayed the exchange with the guards over and over, wondering if all this fuss was really worth it. On one hand, he'd managed to save some soldiers with his potions and prove his strength. On the other, he was now locked up, an outsider in a land he hadn't chosen to be in. He considered his options. Should he try to force his way out of this situation? Or simply leave and continue on his own path? The thought of abandoning the goblins, of leaving these people to their own devices, stung, yet staying might only entangle him further in their conflicts. For a long moment, Raiga simply closed his eyes, weighing his own ambitions against the pull of responsibility. In the silence of the cell, he finally resolved that if his strength and skills were meant to be his path, he'd decide his own fate, either by breaking free from this place or by leading them to a better future. The question remained, should he leave or stay and fight for those who'd come to depend on him? For now, he wasn't sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at him as he awaited his next move. After a few more minutes someone finally came for Raiga. It had been the captain of the guards, and with almost too much kindness he was let free from his cell. He was freed because of the potions he had given to them. They had worked, and exceeded what the dwarfs expected from the slime, making the captain show as much gratitude as he could. The switch-up was somewhat confusing, but he guessed it made sense when he had indirectly healed the man's people. With that, he only asked to be taken to an architect that would either be able to teach his people, or build shelters for him. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all KAGE, out.